Coming up in this episode.
We talk a lot about emotional well-being and so on, but I think there's an intellectual well-being. There's kind of a meter to that where, you're spending a lot of your time navigating conversations, thinking about connections, how the big picture falls together. You're absolutely right. There's an intellectual gas tank that needs to be refilled sometimes.
So I think making sure that you have people that you can go to and just talk about it and offload onto and get proper advice and empathy from is really important. So there's loads of founder support groups out there, and there's some really great ones. So I think if you find one that resonates with you, that can be super helpful. And I've worked in fashion my whole career, really enjoyed it. Worked in merchandising and marketing mainly for some big brands like Burberry and TK Maxx, but 5 years ago became really passionate about sustainability.
The Founders Unplugged podcast, hosted by Greg McCallum. Raw, unedited conversations with entrepreneurs and startup founders.
Hi.
Hello, Daisy. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Very well, thank you. Yeah, busy day, but that's what we like.
Yeah. I'm sorry I missed you last week.
Yeah, I know, that's crazy. Like I thought, oh well, for sure, me. It's a networking event, but it's a testament to just how nuts that whole event is. And I was going around speaking with people as well. Like that was because I was volunteering, and I still managed to miss you. Were you there the whole evening, or did you duck out after your pitch?
Yeah, no, I wasn't there. I think I left maybe about 9:30, I think.
Oh, right. Okay. So relatively early, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But I hadn't been to one of those events before. It was crazy how many people were there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nuts. Did you enjoy it though? Did you have fun?
Yeah, it was really great. Really great for meeting people, and it was great to see other people pitch as well, and hear so many different ideas. Because a lot of the time I'm just kind of in the fashion world, so it's nice to hear other things and ideas that are going on. So it's good.
Meet other equally crazy and ambitious people, right?
Yeah,
it's just exciting. It's like an infectious energy you get off of that sort of crowd, isn't it? So
yeah. It was great.
I didn't even see your pitch because I was out the back speaking, talking people's ear off. So.
Yeah.
I saw the recording of it today though.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It was very scary. I was like, it took me ages afterwards to stop shaking.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Had you not done anything like that before then, or was it just
not in? No, I don't think so. Not really. Not something so spur of the moment, because I kind of went and was like, oh yeah, I'll pitch, but just didn't think I would, get called. So then when I did, I was like, oh, it's actually happening.
Yeah, it's a good way of doing it as well, which is kind of like he says right at the beginning. It's not, it's not necessarily going to appeal to any investors in the room. It's just a really good place to practice. Like if you can do it in front of a crowd of 200 people, like cheering and screaming and all that sort of stuff, then you can do it in front of a few investors. It's a good dry run.
Definitely. Yeah. So you're there every time?
I try to be. Yeah, I missed the one before because I was unwell. But I volunteer and try and help out wherever I can. I know Vasily fairly well. He's been on this podcast before as well. And he's just such a cool guy, a lovely guy. And he's got a very similar ethos to me, which is just do whatever you can to help other people like us, other founders and other people in the space. So that resonates with me. So as soon as I sort of met him and found out about him, I was like, dude, whatever you need, tell me. I want to help. So and he knows that I like to talk and meet people, so that's why he gave me the job of going around speaking to people. That was my job. So perfectly fit. Yeah. So I was going around primarily talking to people about the Slack community and giving them the QR code to get in and stuff. And then while I was there, then people were also asking me commercial advice, because I was like, I'm also a commercial advisor, so is there anything that's bothering you right now? And people were throwing all these problems at me, and I was just like, right, do this. And they were like, wow, awesome. So yeah, it was great fun.
Good.
Yeah. So welcome to the the craziness that is the show. So as you notice, we're already recording. We just get straight into it. But I do have some semblance of structure in this, not much, but some.
Okay.
And that is really the way. I think a good way to start is, obviously people can see your name at the bottom of the screen, and I would have put something up in the edit as well about that. But why don't you introduce yourself and your business to anyone listening? It's kind of your opportunity to do that pitch all over again in a way.
Yeah, you might have to listen to it all again.
Yeah.
So I'm Daisy. I've worked in fashion my whole career. Really enjoyed it. Worked in merchandising and marketing mainly for some big brands like Burberry and TK Maxx. But 5 years ago, became really passionate about sustainability and realized quite quickly that the work I was doing wasn't quite aligned to my values anymore. So my journey to founderism started really small. I was just like, what can I do on a really small personal level? So I started just shopping from small sustainable brands, found these amazing brands and loved them. And then I was like, okay, I wish I could shop these all in one place. So I launched a sustainable fashion marketplace called Loft, which was brilliant. And it felt great to finally be doing something that was aligned with my values. But I realized quite quickly from talking to my customers that although most people want to shop sustainably, they really struggle to find clothes that they love or that fit correctly. So I started working with designers I knew to make upcycled and bespoke clothing. And I was like, oh, there's something really special in this. And my customers were so happy because they're part of that design process, and they've met the designer that's making their clothes. So they have this personalized relationship with them, and it gives them so much more value to their clothes. So that gave me the idea for Loom. So that was a couple of years ago now. So I was on a circular fashion accelerator and launched our MVP a couple of months ago. So it's basically, Loom is now like a Fiverr for fashion designers. So if you have an idea of something you want to make, you can tell us about it and our designers will chat to you. Or if you want to upcycle something, so in your wardrobe you see clothes that you no longer wear, tell us about those items and we'll give you ideas of what we can transform them into.
Yeah, you've got the pitch down to a fine art now.
A few times.
Yeah. So you've launched then. You're raising investment. How have those things been going? How did the launch go, and how's the raising going? Because that's everyone I'm speaking to is obviously saying very similar things. It's tough, but tell me about that. How's it been going?
Yeah, so I think the launch was exciting. I was building Loom alongside another full-time job. I'm now working on Loom full-time. So it's really exciting just to get it out there and start chatting to people who are using it. And it's quite scary when you've been thinking about something for so long to then, get people's opinions on it.
Yeah.
It's super basic, the website at the moment. So, there's so much that I want to change about it, but it's doing the job of putting something out there so that I can get people's feedback, because what I didn't want to do was invest loads of money in something and then realize actually it's, all businesses change so much. So it's good to get that feedback. And the raise, it's a journey. I've never done anything like that before. I think I made what I hear is maybe quite a common journey or mistake, whatever you want to call it, where I started out by pitching to VCs, and which was a really great experience, definitely for pitching and meeting investors and what questions they have. But I was too early for them, and two, I think unless it's the right VC, I don't know how well they work with like a sustainable business, because for me, I'm really passionate about circular fashion. I want to make sure that is always the main focus. So now raising from angels, and I think it's just, you're just building that network of investors and advisors, and you're just constantly out there meeting people and trying to get people along with your vision. And it's tiring.
Yes.
Exhausted, but also it's amazing. And even if it doesn't lead to an investment, when some of these people I've met, I wouldn't have met them otherwise, and learned so much from them. So there's definite positives, even though it's also very tiring.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that about sort of perhaps a common mistake of people going straight to VCs. Yeah, I've heard it a few times. Like it's if you're not familiar with kind of the investing landscape, then it's kind of that's what you assume is maybe the thing to do, especially if you're doing some online research. That's generally what indicates you to go. And also because of, I think, partly, a lot of founders want to think they're a bit further along than they are a lot of the time. So like if you look online and you're like, okay, what stage should I look for VC? And it says, oh, when you're at this stage, oh yeah, I'm at that stage. Yeah. And then so you're like, no, I'm way further along than needing angels. So surely, and then you do. But it's interesting because the vast majority of advice I'm giving to people right now, when I'm speaking to a lot of my clients and doing my pro bono sessions, is not to worry so much about investment.
Yeah.
Like, to be honest, because it's so time consuming and it just takes people away. I'm like, if you've got an MVP, if you've got something that people want to pay for, just start getting money. Just get me, because that's the best kind of money. Is the one that you don't need to pay back. So yeah, a lot of the work I'm working with people now is just like how to make the money, how to make the business profitable. But it's a tough thing to do, especially this time of year. But so the angel thing then is that you'd say it's a fairly new approach. But have you had some interested parties? Is anyone sort of wanting to commit at the moment, or are you waiting for a lead investor to sign on? Like where's all that at?
So I've got some soft commitments. People are really interested in the vision for Loom. I think, like you were saying, it's still really early days. So people are really investing in like me at the moment and where I could take it. And I think, like you were just saying, when you are fundraising, it does take up so much time. So it's that balance between making sure that the business is still growing and I'm not, just leaving that on the side and also continuing. So, and I think with the VC thing as well that we were talking about before, as me, someone who's like never really spoken to investors before, never really been an entrepreneur in that way, I think when you start researching it, it's just VCs are always a thing that come up first. So I think that's another reason why people automatically go there, because if you know, it's easier to apply to that because you just send your deck in and then you might get a meeting with them.
Yeah, that's it. You don't need like almost the sales skills of reaching out to random strangers. You just fill out a web form and see what happens. So
it's almost easier, whereas when you start reaching out to angel investors, it's like, how do you find them? And so it's a very different experience.
Have you been using ShipShape?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, really clever idea.
Daniel was at the event, wasn't he, on the CEO of ShipShape on Wednesday. Really good platform. I come across it a few months back. He's been on as well, and so is his co-founder. He's been on the show. They're really lovely people, really intelligent. I highly recommend anyone who's listening to go back to that episode and listen. All those episodes, actually, both of them, Alistair and Daniel, they're both really interesting guys and have a really interesting approach on the way, because they've been through the same problem as you. So that's why they've decided to do it, which is the whole point of like starting a business, right? You build it around the problems that you know. So that's fantastic. And so the launch then itself, how's that been going in terms of getting new people using the platform and your designers? Like, how's that all coming together?
It's been good. So we launched with 10 designers 3 months ago. Now we've got over 50. So that's great. Fantastic. So that's super exciting. And
in just a month, that's incredible.
So
all people who have signed up like themselves on the website, or there's this people you've actively gone out and spoken to?
A mixture, actually. So at the beginning it was me, reaching out to people in my network, and now people are actually signing up online and I'm reaching out to them to find out more, which is really exciting.
Wow, that's awesome.
And then we've had 10 projects posted on there and had our first customer a couple of weeks ago. So it's exciting. So very early days, but it's great. And it's so great to start speaking to people, they're both designers and customers, about how they're using it and how to make it better. So
and that's really great to hear that you're doing that too, and taking the time to reach out to everyone that's interacting the platform, because that's something that surprisingly little founders do at this stage, when it's so integral. And like not only just because of for all the reasons that are obvious, like it can help you build the platform, so on, but because you can go to investors and say you're doing it. Like that's super impressive to investors to say we're going to keep building this company based on what our users tell us. Like that's so important, because all too often investors give like here's 2,000 pounds, and then go and build something that no one's asked for.
Yeah.
So it's really important. So well, that's fantastic. So 10 projects submitted. So you mentioned it's like similar to Fiverr. We spoke about this before, so I am familiar, but just so like reiterate to anyone listening. So it's similar to Fiverr in that someone can submit a project and then people can kind of bid on the project, or like say, designers can say, I could do this, like, and then you can select who you want, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of tell us either if you know what you want or about the item you want ideas for us to upcycle, and then you can see all of the designers' profiles and they'll start reaching out to you. So you can chat to them directly through the platform, and then they'll send you a quote once they've got all the information they need.
Yeah, and how are the quotes? I mean, are they pretty reasonable generally?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what you want, but I'd say if you're wanting to upcycle something, it's probably between 50 to 100, and it depends. Sometimes you can turn it into multiple things as well, like a dress you could turn into a skirt and a bag and some earrings or something like that. If you want something totally bespoke, so we've had quite a few wedding projects for dresses come through. That can range from 300-400 to the thousands, depending on what you want to go for. So it can vary.
Yeah, I suppose. I love the idea that you can get an item of clothing and get like several things out of it. Like that's always seemed like a really cool prospect to me.
Yeah, and we've actually had some crossovers of the like wedding world and the upcycling, where brides want to upcycle their wedding dresses into something they can wear all the time.
That's smart,
Yeah, so for example, working with someone at the moment to turn their wedding dress into a jumpsuit and dye it a different color, and then she can wear it, all the time, rather than having a dress that she never wears.
That's really clever, because if the amount of times my wife says, when we're like cleaning things out, she comes across a wedding dress, she's like, I wish I could wear it again. And I'm like, put it on, it's fine. But like, but realistically, it's not really the type of thing you'd wear out and about. I love that idea. It's like, turning it into a different kind of keepsake. Even something like if it was turned into multiple things, like you were saying about a set of earrings, like a set of jewelry, even if that was something you were to wear all the time. But it was so it had a piece of your wedding dress in it. And I'm thinking now about my wedding suit. Like I never wear that thing. Like it would be great to turn that into something else. Although technically you can wear suits whenever, there's something about it that's just, well, it's also quite garish. So it is. Yeah. It's very green. I look like a leprechaun. But it's so I'm not sure if it's appropriate to wear attire for most events. It's definitely a wedding outfit. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, that's made me think I might have to put it up there and see what people come back with. That'd be interesting.
And I think that's obviously you're unlikely to throw away your wedding dress or your wedding suit, but there's so many other clothes that you have in your wardrobe that you don't wear. And so a lot of the time, if you're trying to be good, you might take it to a charity shop, but even then a lot of those clothes still end up in landfills. So it's also about giving those clothes a new lease of life and diverting them away from the deserts and where all these clothes end up.
Is that the ultimate mission then? Just to try and prevent this insane culture we have of just throwing everything in the bin, or just filling the landfill? Is that the main vision, or are there other things?
Exactly that. So just trying to make the fashion industry more circular. So even when you buy something sustainable, that still means it's kind of has an end of life that you might still throw it away. And yes, if it's made with organic fibers, it will eventually decompose, but there's still a linear life cycle. So you're still buying it and then throwing it away. Whereas if you have a circular economy, you keep using it, and rather than throwing it in the waste, you can always find a new use for it. So I had a dress that I bought, a maxi dress, and I just, for whatever reason, no longer wore it. So turned it into a skirt and a top. And it's just a simple thing, but now I wear that all the time. So rather than it just sitting there, or me, taking it to a charity shop or throwing it away, it's now got a new use.
Yeah. I think as well, like a lot of people I know love this idea of upcycling their clothes, but just don't have the confidence to do it themselves, right? That's the other thing. Or they can't really afford to learn, because if they learn on a piece of clothing, then they ruin it and then they'll be sad. Like it's just so just having someone else to be able to do it is. You mentioned as well about like how non-synthetic clothes, they might decompose. I learned recently that while that's the case, that you can get clothes that decompose in a reasonable amount of time, because of the dyes and stuff they use, it's still really bad for the environment anyway. So it's completely pointless a lot of the time.
Yeah, it is. So I almost want to say don't get me started on this, because there's so many things I could talk about. But
No, I do want to get you started. That's the point. That's what we're doing. Go, tell me all about it. Like, and I'm also quite ignorant to it, so it's useful for me to learn about.
Yeah, there's so when you buy clothes, there's also, yeah, like you said, the dyes that they can, release toxins back into the environment. But also with recycling, that's quite a big, I guess there's issues with that as well. So if you buy clothes and they've got a mixture of fibers, it's so difficult for us to recycle at the moment. So although you might think it's doing good if you give it to someone to recycle, unless it's all cotton, as an example of one material, and that's like the labels and the stitching as well, it's going to cause issues, and it's actually going to be quite expensive to recycle it. So it's the best, I think the easiest and simplest solution, and probably the best, is to try and just make things circular and reuse them rather than throwing them away or trying to recycle them.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like in the same way that there's the same issues with a lot of different consumables, tech being a good example of like mobile device and so on, the revolution of the right to repair and upgrade and all this kind of stuff is an equal movement, which is just like, because if I personally, and this might be a controversial thing to say, I don't know, but I think the whole recycling thing is an entire scam.
Yeah,
to be completely honest, I think it's a huge scam, and it has been from the start. There's no incentive for these companies to really, or even your local government, to actually recycle much of the stuff that you do, for the reasons you just said. The vast majority of it is mixed materials. Like even with plastic, like the vast majority of the plastic we use can't be recycled.
Yeah. And
then on top of that, it costs them money to recycle it. So what do? They ship it all off to China, and it goes into the sea or landfill anyway. So it's all a load of rubbish, literally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's really difficult. But there are some amazing companies and startups out there as well. So I recently was working with someone who was on the circular fashion accelerator that I was on, called Small But Perfect. And she has a studio, and she can actually take mixed fibers and break them down, and then they have a special agent that they turn into like a leather product. So you don't have to separate the fibers, and you can turn it into this like leather material, and then they can take the product back once you're done with it and turn it back into the material again without any waste or any water usage, or any kind of
like byproducts kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there are some amazing companies out there that are starting to do these things, but they just need support and money to research. So
yeah, well, that's it. And it's just a shame that it has to be in the private sector where these things are, these innovations are being made, when meant to be an infrastructure already in place, publicly to solve this problem, and it's just not. It's quite frustrating. But yeah, that accelerator, tell me a bit more about that. How did that come about? How did you get involved with that?
So my last business was in sustainable fashion. So I was kind of in that world already and heard about it. So it was a circular fashion accelerator called Small But Perfect, which was supported by Fashion Revolution and the World Fair Trade Organization. And they chose 26 projects and gave them 18 months of support. So you had one-to-one mentoring, you had there was 3 boot camps where we went out to different cities across Europe, and they gave us information, how to build our network around circular fashion. And it was all about taking sustainable businesses or businesses that weren't and trying to make them more circular. So again, that focus on not just being sustainable, but becoming circular.
That's good. So what were some of the key things you think you learned from that whole experience?
I mean, it gave me a much better understanding of how circular businesses can work and what models exist, and also just more of an understanding and knowledge about sustainable fashion in general and all the different solutions and problems as well that are out there. But I think the main takeaway for me, well, 2, it gave me the grant to make Loom, which was amazing. So I'm but perhaps more importantly than that was like the networking and just the support that we got from not only the people in the cohort, but the events that they put on for us. And yeah, I would say that the people that I met was the biggest thing that I took away from it.
That's it. It's funny. That's always the answer with a lot of people that I speak to about these different programs and things like that. The most valuable thing are the relationships that you take away from these things. Just like you saying about how doing the investment, doing your raise, and like how that, even if you don't get any money, there's from that, there's still a huge amount of value in just speaking with people. I mean, that's why I like to think this is quite useful too, because if it puts you out there, it puts us both out there, and people can learn a bit more about you as not just as a CEO and a founder, but also as a person, because ultimately that's how we connect with people, right? So I think that's that's really interesting that you said that. That sounds like a really cool program. So what's next? Obviously you're raising, but presumably you're also just going to keep pushing forward, keep getting more users on board. Like, what's the plan to sort of just take things to the next level? What's on the agenda there?
So a big thing for me at the moment is organising our first events, which is really exciting. So we're doing a panel talk next week at Curve Club, and I'm moderating it, and I've kind of got my dream panel actually. So I've got Scott Staniland is one of my business advisors as well, and he's a sustainable fashion ambassador and fashion model, and Ashita Cabra, who's the founder of By Rotation, a rental app, Esther Knight and Patrick McDowell, so circular fashion designers. So for me, I'm really excited just to meet them and ask some questions. So we've got a panel talk, a Q&A, and then drinks and networking afterwards. So that's super exciting. And then we've got more events coming up, some focused more for our designer community. So we've got a panel talk with some of our more experienced designers on how they set up their brand. And that one's more aimed at people who are interested in starting their own sustainable fashion brand. And then some pop-ups towards Christmas, which we're partnering with other like-minded communities. So that's a really big step.
Yeah, that's really great. And that's it's a hugely underrated way to get your platform out there as well, of just doing actual physical events. So people just think that because you have an online platform that all of your activity, sales and marketing wise, needs to be online. There's a huge amount you could be doing in your local communities to get the word out there. That's really great that you're doing that. That's awesome. With the panel that you're talking about, then, so how did you manage to nab them? Your dream panel, how did that come about?
To be honest, just through people.
Yeah.
So
don't ask, you don't get, right? So you just
I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned, actually, because it didn't come naturally to me. But I met Scott when I was showcasing Loom at Fashion Revolution's Open Studios. So they had a open studio in April where some of the projects from that accelerator got to showcase their work and then also do a Q&A session. So I met him there and then asked if he would be interested in meeting for a coffee, and then he became my advisor. And then he's introduced me to a couple of other people on the panel. And so, it's just kind of come around in a roundabout way.
Man, it's not what you know, it's who you know. That's what it comes down to. That's what do you mean by that you sort of been learning that more? I think I know what you mean, but can you expand on that you've been learning more about, don't ask, don't get? Because that's an interesting thing. Is that you weren't particularly comfortable with asking for favors? Is that what you mean? Or
I think so. And I think for a lot of my life, I didn't really like putting people out of their way to do things, if that makes sense. So I would always, I guess, being a people pleaser, I would always want to make sure other people are happy, and I'd feel uncomfortable asking for something in return unless I'd done loads for them and felt like, okay, I deserve some of your time. And I think especially when you're like me, a founder in an early stage business, a lot of the time I'm asking for things and I can't really give that much back at the moment. I will in the future, but right now it feels like a lot of take. So but I've learned how much value you do get from that. So I do it a lot now, probably all the time. If I meet someone, I'm like, oh, that's amazing, I'd love to learn more. I'll always be like, oh, can we go for a coffee and can I learn more from you? And then hopefully I can repay the favor later down the line.
But even if you don't, I don't think people mind, that people are just happy. You'd be surprised how many people are just happy to help, especially in the, the startup community. Because there's a lot of empathy because of, you know, a lot of the people you speak to have been there at some point themselves, or, you know, when it's people talking about what they're passionate about too, like, then they just love to hear the sound of their own voice sometimes. So it's, you know, I know I certainly do when it comes to, you know, giving out my free advice to people. I love solving problems, and I love to see people succeed. And so it's the same sort of thing. Like, yeah, it's interesting, and I'm glad that you've overcome that somewhat, because there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of traits in being a founder that are uncomfortable initially, but you need to get comfortable with. Like I always say, you need to get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Because there's so much uncertainty in being a startup founder that you're going to have to live with it. And there's definitely some personality traits, you know, trying to be a bit more of the focus of attention when you're in a room, you know, commanding an audience, you know, being a good public speaker, like all these things that are not natural things, you know. Like, how have you found some of those other things, like maybe speaking to a crowd, like, because you just did that on Wednesday, right? Like you said, you know, not something you've done before. Are you getting confident with that? Is something you've always been confident with, or?
So I think the pitching event, I was very nervous about that, but it was more of a spur of the moment thing. And I think with sometimes things like that, just always put yourself out there, and then, you know, what's the worst that can happen in a way? Right, exactly. Even if it went horribly wrong,
picture everyone naked, right? That's the thing.
So I think putting yourself out of your comfort zone is really important. And I've been doing a lot more speaking recently, which I have been very nervous about before. But I think as soon as I'm sat down or standing and I start talking, especially when it's, you know, about circular fashion, and I'm so passionate about that. As soon as I start talking, I'm like, oh, it's fine. And I actually really enjoy it, because I'm just so passionate about it. And it doesn't really feel like I'm, even though I am, you know, promoting myself and the business, it feels like I'm just talking about something I want people to learn more about.
Right.
Where it's fine.
And I think that's really important, because that comes across, right? Yeah. Because it's essentially, it's sales, right? This is what, you know, I spend the vast majority of my career, you know, I have spent the vast majority of my career talking about, is that the key skill a founder needs at any stage, especially early on, is sales skills. And they are not as scary as people think they are. You know, if you were to look online, you would think sales is some kind of like thing close to being a surgeon, that it's like this incredibly complicated. It's not. It's the art of communication. That's all it is. And one of the key aspects of any kind of, you know, engaging conversationalist is that they are engaging by being passionate and adding a narrative to what they're talking about. And so everyone's got that within them, because if you're passionate about sustainable and circular fashion, like as soon as you open your mouth and start talking about it, you're automatically engaging, because you care and you make other people care. So it's, you know, it's really not rocket science, I don't think. It's just having the confidence to start opening your mouth and let the words fall out, you know. And it might be the case that you're a bit rubbish to begin with, but the more you do it, the better you get, right? Like I always say, aim to be shit at something before you can be good at it, right?
So, I like that. That's a good one.
Yeah, but you've just got to do it first, right? And it's great practice. I'm really glad to hear that you're doing a lot of more sort of public speaking and stuff like that too, because that's I think that's really important for a lot of reasons. Psychologically, it's really, you know, helps with confidence. It can really help you feel a lot more stable in your decision sometimes to be a founder, which is, you know, quite often you can be second guessing yourself. But more than anything, it prepares you to be in front of some pretty scrupulous characters, you know, who you might be pitching, you know, whether that's future customers, investors, whatever. I think it's an incredibly useful skill to be able to do that. Incredibly useful. Good for life in general as well, right?
Yeah, and I think you get such a sense. It's so rewarding when you feel like you've done something you've never done before. You know that you were nervous about it and you did it anyway. And then I think it just gives you more purpose, because you know that you're growing and you know that you're progressing. So even if it's a really small thing, if it's a big deal to you and you do it, then that's amazing. But I also do think that there's the balance between, you know, putting yourself out of your comfort zone, but then making sure that you have time to recover afterwards as well. Because once you've done that, but sometimes afterwards you're just like, oh my God, I'm exhausted.
Well, it just depends how much you drink when you're at these events, right?
Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
But it can be emotionally draining, though. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I think, and intellectually draining, which we don't talk about often enough.
If you are enjoying this episode, please subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments.
We talk a lot about emotional well-being and so on, but I think there's an intellectual well-being. There's kind of a meter to that, where you're spending a lot of your time navigating conversations, thinking about connections, how the big picture falls together. And when we're in social situations, we're quite often making those connections, introduced to that person, and your matchmaking, and this, that, and the other. And there's a lot of things firing all at once there. And I think you're absolutely right. There's an intellectual gas tank that needs to be refilled sometimes. So that you need to recharge.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Put on a good movie one night and just not do anything, take a day off, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
What's aside from your own events, are you planning on going to anything else? You've got any other speaking engagements coming up, and any sort of notable dates in the diary that you're quite excited about?
So there's some events coming up with Fashion District, who put on amazing events. So a lot of panel talks and workshops. They've got some events that are coming up later in autumn, which I'm really looking forward to. Don't think the dates have been released yet, but if you're into sustainable fashion, you should definitely look up the Fashion District because they're brilliant. So yeah, looking forward to those. But no other speaking yet, but would love to. So if anyone wants me, I'm there. yeah,
definitely. I don't know if I don't know if it'd be interesting to you anyway, but there's a local thing to me because I'm based down in Eastbourne. There's a DigiFest that's this month, towards in a couple of weeks actually. It's the first ever event of the kind in our area, and we've got quite a few specialists coming down, different founders and so on doing speaking. I'm speaking at it. There's a few that were at the event on Wednesday that are speaking on a specific topic. You can always reach out to them. I don't know if they've reached their capacity for speakers yet, but they're a lovely group of people. I could always introduce you if you were interested in speaking with them. And it's in sunny seaside town of Eastbourne, which can't go wrong there. A lot of people I know who are making the trip down from London or whatever, they're just like, I'm just going to stay a few days. It's like, it's like the end of summer at the seaside. Like, why not?
Yeah, definitely.
So,
no, that would be great. Thank you.
What about exhibits and stuff? Like, obviously there's a lot going on in the fashion world where there's always different kinds of events going on. But do you find that it's quite difficult to find something that meets the criteria of what it is you're doing, in the sense that it is circular and sustainable fashion as opposed to just mainstream fashion to a degree, or is there a decent amount of crossover there where actually you could go to some of these sort of fashion exhibits and you would have a home there and you'd be welcomed with open arms?
I think sustainable fashion is becoming more and more of a hot topic in the fashion industry. I think everyone knows that it has to change, and obviously it's really difficult the bigger your company or your brand is to make those changes, but there's more and more noise about it. And I think there's with exhibitions there's always something going on that you can go to. So I think generally people are very pro sustainability. It's just bringing that to life and making those changes that are needed. And I think it's a lot easier for smaller brands to do that, or startups, than for these massive established brands, because it just takes so much change within their supply chains and their whole business for that to happen.
Yeah, which is a shame, because I mean, you could argue that they have an ethical responsibility there, but of course they also have a responsibility to their board members to make money. So it's a bit of a difficult situation. I mean, it's just like any business, I suppose, where there's the ethical and environmental responsibilities, but implementing them isn't as simple as that, is it? Like, you could look at we could look at any company, but especially like energy companies as a prime example of that, where it's just embedded, and it seems like fashion companies or brands, or whatever you want to call them, or whatever they are called, I don't know, it's almost synonymous with cheap labor, right? And that's a huge problem.
I mean, that's like the other extreme. I mean, like, some companies are just I don't think there's even any trying, right, to make any positive impact within that. But I guess when your model is based on selling clothes that are like £10, unless you change your whole business model, that's not gonna you're not gonna be able to do that. And I'm not saying that is an excuse, like they probably just shouldn't exist. But there's some, I think some of the fast fashion brands out there is crazy. There was a stat I read recently where we've got enough clothes on the planet to dress the next 6 generations.
Wow.
So we've already got so many clothes out there, and it's scary the amount that is already existing. Like we don't need any more.
and yet some people still don't have access to clothing, which is disgusting. But the thing is, don't you think that, I mean, the very industry that you're part of, even if you're involved in it and over here, is still, everyone's accountable for it in a sense, because the reason why clothes are continuously being developed, even though we've probably got too many, and why they're not accessible to everyone and all that kind of thing, is because the fashion industry is based on this cycle of trends, and it's based on seasons, and it's based on always trying to sort of get the newest thing and create a new interest in something. Like, so doesn't everyone sort of bear that responsibility fairly equally to an extent?
Yeah, and I think it's just changing your mindset about your relationship with clothes. So I think when you're so used to seeing all of these trends, and you feel you're so used to being able to buy stuff all the time, not just clothes, anything, you kind of, it's addictive, right? Like even with, like you were talking about phones earlier, when like a new phone comes out, you're always tempted to be like, oh, maybe I'll just upgrade it and get it, or we're just so programmed to always want the next thing, and we haven't really had it put in our faces before when we're thinking about the actual waste that causes. I think now we do know, and I think it's becoming more and more common knowledge of the issues that are out there. So I think it's just trying to change your mindset, and I think there's small things you can do. I remember one of the first things I did was like unscribing from fast fashion brands, so that I wouldn't even get tempted, because I wouldn't get the email with like the sale or whatever it is. With yourself, and I think that value that you have with your clothes as well. So like some people have like a capsule wardrobe, so they have their basic clothes that they have, and then they'll get extra special pieces. But even just investing in things that are good quality, so that you're not gonna have to throw it away because it breaks. And if it's really cheap, it's probably not worth getting mended. But rather than getting loads of those, just investing in some really good pieces that are tailored to you, that fit you perfectly, and that are going to last you for ages. So it's just as with anything, it's just breaking a habit is quite difficult. But
it is, and also I don't think it's possible for certain people. Like the vast majority of people don't have or aren't in the position where they can make those kinds of financial investments for clothes, or things like that, and or just don't have the time, or both. You know what I mean? Like to consider these things. So it's difficult, because fast fashion exists for a reason, and just in the same way that like I love tech, right? So I will buy stuff that I probably don't need tech wise. I usually sell it afterwards. I'm an avid eBayer because I buy so much junk as well. But I know for a fact that's I'm quite a privileged position of having that bad habit, because I can afford to buy these things. But for most people, it's buy something that's cheap because that's all they can afford, and then they have to throw it out and get a new one a couple of years later, whether that's because they've bought a cheap keyboard that breaks on them, or even cheap clothes. So it's difficult, because the responsibility is on all of us. But I think for the vast majority of people who are just trying to get by, it's not their fault. A good example of that is my kids. Have you got kids? I can't remember. Did we talk about that before? You haven't got kids? So then this is an interesting scenario. So my kid, he's 8. He's just started year 4, and the amount of shoes that boy goes through is insane, right? Like it's like a new pair of shoes every couple of months. I'm not kidding. Like, and it's not because he outgrows them. It's because they get destroyed. And then of course on top of that, there's the school uniforms, and you have to have multiple school uniforms is a whole other thing. That's a fucking scam if I've ever heard one. But anyway, Maybe we can dice. Maybe you know about that more than I do, but that feels like a scam business right there. And yeah, you know, go through so many things. Like, what can you do in that situation? You have to just chuck them away. Like, these are ruined. Like, you know, can you upcycle them? Probably, but like, you know, the amount that you go through every you know year, and you know, the uniforms and the trousers and the socks and then the PE kit, and like, it's just so much. I think that's when it starts adding additional pressure. You know, a young professional couple that's taking home sort of between them, you know, 50 to 80k a year. Okay, you can probably justify spending a decent amount on your clothing and buying more long-term stuff. But as soon as you add a kid into the mix,
Yeah.
like, oh shit, you know, we just need to buy whatever.
Yeah.
So it's difficult, isn't it? You know?
Yeah, and I think it's I don't have a lot of experience with children's wear, but it's finding those ways to make it easier for people as well. Because like you said, even if you don't have the money, maybe, or even if you do have the money, sorry, maybe you don't have the time.
Yeah.
So it is finding those solutions. I did see something recently, which was like a thick sole that you can put onto shoes so that wears out, so you don't have to throw your shoes away, so that it's kind of another way to help extend the life. But yeah, it's hard, and I sympathize for you.
Yeah, it feels like it's almost every other week I open the bin to put something in it, and there's another pair of kids' shoes in the bin. I'm just like, how is this possible? Because don't forget, he doesn't just go through his school shoes, he goes through his regular shoes too, so it's always like a pair of shoes in the bin. I'm just like, what? This is nuts, you know? And it's it drives me mad. But the thing is that you don't want to buy something that's going to last, because he's going to be outgrown it anyway within a set period of time. So it's just like, well, what's the point? Kids fashion is an interesting area when it comes to sustainability, because there doesn't seem, at least to me, to be any obvious solution on how to deal with that. Like, I've always thought with kids stuff in general, there should be like a circular industry based around it, whereby like you get a load of stuff to look after the kid based on their age, you then pass it on to the next person whose kids come to that age, and then you get another thing from somewhere else, and it kind of just all moves around, which in some ways it kind of does through like third-party marketplaces like Facebook and stuff like that, but just more of an official thing. So like, you know, you could just say, my kid is this age, you get all the stuff, and then every month it just changes over. Like, that would be so much easier.
I think there are rental things that do exist for children with that.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah,
I think, like you were saying, it's just if they get worn out completely.
Right, and that's the problem. They mostly do, because they're not made to last.
Yeah.
So perhaps there's an opportunity for someone listening out there right now to start a business to make kids stuff that really, really lasts, and then rent it to people so it can just move around.
Yeah.
That's the key. Make shoes out of gold. No, gold wouldn't be very good. Titanium.
Yeah,
that's what we need. Titanium kids shoes.
Yeah.
And also stop them running around as much as well.
Yeah.
Fucking nice, bit of peace and quiet.
Yeah, there is another brand, I think they're called Petit Pli, and they make children's clothes, like really high quality, that actually it's I'm not an expert in it, but I know of them. It grows with the children as they grow.
Oh, interesting.
So
okay.
it's made with like pleated materials so that it can, you know, last more than, you know, a year or however, or even less than that.
That's smart. Yeah, that's I'll have to look into that. That's quite a clever idea. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, something that just some sort of way, either the design or the fabric itself that can. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, I might have to look into that. Just out of curiosity more than anything else. Yeah, because I'm sure it's probably way out of my price range. You know, I've got to keep the money to buy on useless tech. That's my thing. But yeah. But well, you said earlier on that like there's some element of or a few elements of the sustainable fashion and circular fashion world that you could talk about, you know, for till the end of time. So what other areas and problems are there that you see that maybe aren't being talked about enough that you could shed some light on? Because I'm interested to learn from you, right? What is some of the stuff here that isn't as obvious that we should be aware of, aside from the stuff maybe we've already talked about?
Yeah, so I think It's hard sometimes because things that seem obvious to me aren't obvious to other people and I don't realize that until I have conversations, because I'm in this kind of echo chamber of
Right, you're in the world, right? So yeah, exactly. Just imagine that I'm a complete idiot, which I am, so it's not too difficult to imagine. And just educate me on the whole thing, right? First of all, what is fashion? No, I'm joking. Maybe not that, but you know what I mean. Like, what's the
I think
a blank slate
with sustainability, it's just taking small steps. So I think when you buy something, just even being interested in what it's made of is like a really great first thing to look at, because I think you'd be surprised, even like really quite expensive brands use really bad materials. So I think this is obvious, but like always trying to buy stuff that's organically, or at least like a natural material, so that it won't last forever. And
but isn't that the difficult thing? Sorry to cut you off. But isn't that a bit of a counterintuitive thing? Because we're talking about wanting to have clothing that lasts for a long time, but then, and the reason why we have synthetic materials is because they do tend to last longer. They're a bit more hardy and things like that. But then, of course, they're not biodegradable. So then we have this problem. So what choices should we be making there?
But I think so you can have clothes made of natural materials which are really strong, and they're going to last more than your lifetime.
Okay.
They will eventually biodegrade in a safe way. Whereas you can buy, I mean, if you look at the fast fashion websites and you buy their clothes, they are polyester, which you'd think would be potentially more hardy and durable, but it's not, and it breaks straight away. So I think if you're buying something that's well made and it's made from natural fibers, it doesn't mean it's not going to last for you for a very long time.
What defines well made, in your opinion?
So a few things. So I think making sure that it's designed well, and also fits you well. So those are two, like, I think everyone's guilty of buying something because they liked it, and then actually they never wear it because it doesn't quite look right, or and if you do that, you can get your clothes altered. And I know these are all expenses, but I think if you can afford it, then it's a good solution to have, and you'll find that you then start wearing these clothes more, and they mean a lot more to you as well. And I think when you get clothes that are tailored to you, you do automatically have so much more value, because you've met the tailor that's perfectly fits to you, and it feels like something extra special. So I think natural materials, and then I think just being curious is the first thing. So like, what's it made of? Does a brand even have a sustainability page on their website? And when they make claims, a good thing is are there any facts? Because if they've put the effort in to actually make something sustainable, you'd want to shout about all these amazing facts, like all the CO2 that you saved, or the waste. Or so if you see a fact, I think that's a really good sign. If there's just like a general statement, probably not so good.
Like, we feed our kids lunch twice a day that make these clothes, so it's not as impressive as certain things. I know what you mean. That's interesting, because I never really even considered to check the label and see what my items of clothing are made out of, or to look at the company. But it's something that I should probably start doing. Not that I buy that many clothes, but actually that's maybe an interesting thing to bring up, which is, do you find that the vast majority of people interested in this are generally biased towards more women than men? Is there a clear bias towards, gender bias in this world? I mean, fashion as a whole, but also especially in the sort of sustainable and circular fashion arena. Do you find that, or is that because of, it's not something that I would have ever considered looking at this kind of stuff? Is that just because of the way I shop, because I'm a man, or because of or is it just because of the way I am, and actually I'm an outlier there?
I don't know. I think fashion, I would say, is obviously more heavily weighted to women generally.
Right.
So I guess sustainable fashion maybe as well, just because of how it is in the broader industry. But I think if you are a person that's interested in sustainability, then I think your clothes is probably one of the first places that you might start with, because it's something you normally would buy maybe fairly regularly. And there's some amazing sustainable menswear brands out there.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know on that one. I don't have the facts.
Because I've always felt very underserved by the fashion and
Really?
clothing industry as a man, and most men I speak to feel the same way. And in
Yeah.
fact, I was literally having this conversation with my wife yesterday at the dinner table when she went out recently to buy more clothes for our son, because he needs them before going back to school. And she was talking about how the selection is even worse this year. It's not like it's suddenly got worse. It's always bad for boys and men. Very limited choices, and then you've got, right next to the boys aisle or the men's aisle, huge areas for girls and women.
Yeah.
And so I think, men just don't feel included in the conversation, let alone feel like they have a voice to demand anything. So it's interesting to know that there's a sustainable company. Can you name a few? Do you know any?
Yeah, so there's one called Batch London, and they do batches of like casual suits. It's men and women. Surplus, I can send you the links as well. So they use surplus material to make their clothing.
That's cool.
And I really love their style. It's kind of, some of it's a bit like Talented Mr. Ripley
right
kind of style.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at it now. Very smart stuff. Yeah. I like that. I'm looking at a suit jacket. Oh no, what have you done?
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to think of some others. There's another one, I think you pronounce it Che. Che Studios, they have like sustainable menswear as well. So there are brands out there. I'm not so familiar with it just because haven't been a part of like the menswear world for a while. But yeah, I think it's interesting what you were saying, that it's clearly not as well developed an area as women's wear.
It's not, which seems like a missed opportunity for me, because if there's men have just as much, if not more, disposable income as women. Boys, like I said, especially go through way more clothes than young girls, because they're a nightmare and they just get themselves into all kinds of predicaments that ruin their clothes. So it's just, and like you said, for the longest of times, I feel at least with my experience in my circle, I can't speak for all men, but that men are generally underserved in the fashion and clothing industries, that we don't have as much choice unless you go to the very higher ends, and then suddenly you've got a lot of choice, but you have to spend a lot more money. But generally speaking, it is pretty bland. That's why I opt to just, I'm not really making a statement with what I choose to wear, because I maybe if I had more options, maybe I would, but I'll throw in a nice shirt every now and then, but that's about it. And even then, it's the case of just finding what fits, because and what looks semi-decent. And I don't feel like I'm able to make or include sustainable decisions in that and so on, because I'm limited already. So I'm just buy it from here because this is literally the only place that sells what I want. You know what I mean? So it's it's interesting. And I'd also be interested to know, maybe from people listening and so on, what they feel like. But the opportunity to upcycle for men too, like I said, like I've got a suit, it needs upcycle. I've got a lot of clothes that sit there that don't get used, so I wonder what could be done with those. And
I think that's the one of the issues, is people just don't have time, and they don't want to spend loads of time researching sustainable menswear brands unless you're super passionate about it, like I guess
you have to have a predisposition towards it, maybe.
Like if you speak to people and you say, oh, would you prefer to shop sustainably, I think most people would say yes if they can, but it's just making that really easy and accessible. So
exactly, that's the key, I think, to all of this conversation about sustainability and eco-friendly and all that, is it has to be done in a way that can slot into people's lives and not disrupt them too much, right? In the same way that companies, if they need to make the choices like you said, well, that you can't uproot their entire business strategy and their economics. It has to be something that's relatively easy to implement. That's just the reality of the way we are as people, right?
And I think that's why one solution is for companies to be forced to to make more sustainable decisions. And in Europe, it's quite interesting because they're introducing product passports, where you have to be able to say for every product where it's come from and where it was made and all the information behind it when you sell something, which is now putting more pressure on companies to really look at their supply chain and make it more sustainable, because it's going to be so obvious if it's not. So I think things like that as well, more like systemic change, will definitely help.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for stuff like that, but then equally, you know, something that you may have noticed from speaking to me in the past, and maybe especially more now, is like I like to look at things from as many angles as possible. And while that sounds like a really good idea, I can also see the huge negative impact that could have on a business, in the fact that they would have to spend an enormous amount of time and resources in actioning that, which would then inevitably pass on that cost to the consumer. So it's you know, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, that one. While it's great, you know, the average consumer that can go out and to Primark and, you know, spend 20 quid and clothe their entire family, suddenly that's not going to have the same effect, because of this law that they do not care about. You know, they don't care about this regulation. They don't care where it comes from, but then they're hit by it. You know, it's like, this is the problem with a lot of these stability and environmental things that we're implementing, is it has a knock-on effect to the end customer, which is a problem.
Yeah, no, it's not easy. And then at the same, there's like I guess there's like the two ways, because you've got all of this climate change and we've got this climate crisis, which also unfortunately seems to affect the people who or, you know, are already in like third world countries, or like, you know, in a not a good position already. So you need to do something to stop that, but then also it seems to have the biggest effect on those people who are already struggling, you know, to afford it, or so. Yeah, it's difficult. And
I suppose there's a really maybe unorthodox position to be held, but I have heard talked about too, which is, you know, we talked about the labor issues with some of these clothing companies and the ethical situation there, but I've heard someone talk before about the fact that in certain areas in third world countries, these things are like the lifeblood of these communities, and without them, these communities wouldn't be sustained at all. So while it's like, you know, absolute peanuts, at least they're alive, you know. And there was, I've heard stories before about, you know, companies closing down some of these sweatshops, if you want to call them that, I don't know, you know, factories, whatever. And as a result, you know, hundreds, if not thousands, of people have suffered even more as a result of these things closing. So it's like, it's difficult. Again, it's a double-edged sword. Nothing's simple, right? Nothing's black and white. And, you know, you could, okay, there's issues there with maybe the treatment of these individuals and the age of some of them and so on. But sometimes something is better than nothing, you know?
Yeah, I'd say with that, I think the first thing is, though, making sure that they do get paid, even if it is really small, because there's so many big brands that just haven't paid these like factories since like COVID, and big brands like Nike, and so there's millions that's still unpaid. So yeah, I agree, shutting them down can cause, you know, havoc for those people that are working there relying it. But
there's a fair trade system in place for clothing, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it applies there too, right? You know, because I know more about food. I'm the chef at home, so I deal with all of the food side of things, and so I try and be conscious about the sustainability when it comes to food and the fair trade and so on. Like that seems like a good approach there, where, you know, as long as it's, because there are issues with that system too, as long as it's being upheld properly.
Yeah.
But no, that's surprising. I didn't know about that. What is the reason these companies are giving for that? Like, is it just?
I don't think they really touch on it, to be honest. There's campaigns, yeah. There's the pay up campaign. It's been going on for years to make these companies pay their employees, and I don't know if I've ever seen a statement from one of them as to why not. I think they've kind of got away with it, and so people are trying to campaign to make sure that those people do get paid. But yeah,
bastards. Yeah. Yeah. I noticed on my left, but your right hand. Sorry, this is a completely separate topic. So you've got some tattoos on both your arms and hands, but you're on your right wrist, I think it is. You have the what's it from? Is it the Norse symbol for fertility?
So I have a lot.
so yeah, like, oh right, yeah, you have got a lot. They're all Norse
actually is Elvish.
Okay. right?
Yeah, that one is. But the ones that are on my hands are Nordic runes.
They're Nordic, and the one on your right wrist. So
This
that
one?
one, yeah. If no, so further down, sort of more on your arm.
Yes.
That one there. Is that the symbol for fertility? I
And
recognized it. Oh.
so it's for fertility and also like guidance.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. No, I think the one I'm thinking of looks a bit more like the figure 8, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's more like diamond shapes, maybe.
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Why Elvish and Norse?
So I have always been fascinated by Nordic culture, and I have just been researching runes, and I got my hand tattoos done a while ago, and just chose ones that had specific meanings that I wanted to be reminded of. So whether it was like protection or positivity, and so that's why I had my hands. And then this one, I am just a massive Lord of the Rings fan.
Oh, really? Oh, cool.
And my friend had started tattooing, and I was like, oh, I'd love to. She was looking for people to practice on. And I was like, oh, I'd love to. What could I get done? And I was like, oh, I'll do that.
That's awesome. And do you have any more? Is it just your hands and arms?
I have a lot, actually. So I've got, I don't know how many, probably about 12.
You stop counting after a while. Like,
Yeah.
it just doesn't, it's one piece, right? People always ask me, I'm like, I don't fucking know how many tattoos I got. It's just tattoos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just very addictive. I mean,
They
some of them now, when I look at them, I got them done a very long time ago. Probably wouldn't get them done if I see now.
Yeah. The vast majority of mine, I feel that
Really?
way. But at the same time, like, I don't regret getting them because they meant something to me then. And a lot of people ask me that. Like, I'm sure you get that all the time for people who don't have tattoos, which is rarer now, to be fair. But like, do you regret any? It's like, yeah, of course I do. But I'm comfortable with it. You know, like.
Yeah. And some of them I really love as well. And there's like artists that I'd followed for a really long time and then managed to get some of their work done. So
cool.
then it's really special. And so yeah, but there's definitely a mix of very good and very bad. But
yeah, I can sympathize with that for sure. I've had a good few years break from getting anything now, and I'm itching because my wife went recently. She's covered as well, and she's got some beautiful tattoos. She's found a recent tattoo artist that does amazing Disney stuff because she loves Disney cartoons. So she's got a whole leg dedicated to some, old school Disney cartoons, Aladdin, and all that. Yeah, and she loves it. And so she recently got more work done on her other piece that she's working on her arm, which is all like sea creatures, because she loves all the sea creatures. And I'm so jealous.
You get jealous, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to go again. I just haven't got I haven't got the time, and B, I haven't found an artist, because my artist that was doing my sleeve has disappeared off the face of the planet, and we can't find him. So yeah, we can't book him, and it's unfinished. He started doing all of this, and it's unfinished. So I need to find someone who can kind of flow into that style and somewhat finish it, and then make it their own a bit. But then just finding the time to do it, because it's like this bit here. Oh, I don't advise.
Yeah, I was going to say,
never,
that's very brave.
Never again will I ever get any elbow tattooed. Like, it's not technically finished as well. That was a whole day, and it got towards the end of the day, and I was like, dude, I can't keep going. There was like an hour left. I was like, I'm sorry, man. I just can't. I was feeling sick and like.
See, I guess I'm lucky in a way, because I don't have anything that's kind of the only one that I guess is I've got a hummingbird here, but nothing apart from that is shaded. So a lot of mine is kind of all like outlined. So I have never had to sit through like such a long session.
Yeah, I like that look though. That outlined look. It's really nice. Like, there's some things that I wish I'd maybe simplified it and done that sort of approach. So it looks really nice.
Do that for your next ones.
Yeah, maybe, especially if I go anywhere near the elbow or any other joints.
Yeah.
I similar to you, I had these symbols done there, and they're actually set two under my wrist, but you can't see them because the other tattoo kind of goes around them. And these are symbols representing neurotransmitters in the brain that represent the different chemical pathways. So serotonin, dopamine, adrenaline, and the other one, which I can never pronounce, I think it's icrocysylene or something. It's the neurotransmitter responsible for dreaming, basically. And I've always liked the idea of, the symbols that we find in nature,
Yeah.
and what they represent, which is really cool. But I the reason why I mentioned the one that I saw there, and I
Yeah.
thought it was the symbol for fertility, is I tattooed that one on my wife
Oh,
a
amazing.
few years back. Yeah, when we were going through IVF, which eventually was successful. After 4 years of trying, we were getting a bit fed up.
Yeah.
And I was learning how to tattoo just as a hobby, not because I ever wanted to make a career at it, just because I was curious. Because
Yeah.
I used to do a lot more in art, and so I was like, well, let me try a different medium. I've never picked up a gun before, so let me give it a go. And so I got it, and I was mucking around at home, and my wife was just like, yeah, that looks pretty good, you can do me one. So so I did her a couple.
Oh, that's exciting. I've always wanted to try that. So how did you practice? What were you practicing on?
So I practiced on just like some silicone, like fake skin that you can buy.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I practiced on my own leg.
Oh, okay. And how was that?
Yeah, it was all right. It was very different than the skin, because obviously skin moves around, and you've got the shape of it around the bone and the muscle and all that. So that's why I was like, I did a few. I speed ran it, right, because I'm impatient. I was like, I'm not going to learn to do this commercially or anything like that. It's just a hobby. So I did a few. I was like, okay, I think I get the idea, feel for it, and so on. I was like, right, now I'm just going to do my own leg, and then so I just did it. So I did freestyle a couple of things on my leg, and I was like, okay, I think I've got it. My wife saw them. She was like, that's pretty decent. Do you want to do me? I was like, yeah, right. And then as soon as I did that, I was like, right, brilliant. Put it away. Never touched it again. Like, I've done that now.
Yeah. Oh no, that's really interesting. I've always wanted to try a stick and poke. So actually, most of my tattoos are stick and poke ones.
Oh, really? Okay. Interesting.
But yeah, never got round to it. But I'd love to be able to
do it. There's probably little like classes out there you can do with professionals who for people who want to like learn it. Go for it. I think as well, these things are really important. Like when you've got interests and hobbies outside of your career, they become so important when your career becomes quite an all-encompassing and time-consuming and stressful thing. Like the things that you do outside of it become way more important and weighted. So anything you can do to take your mind away from these things. And I find tattooing, I'm sure you do too, to be one of the most relaxing experiences. It's like getting a massage. It's like especially I've never had one in that style, but I've heard that that's even more therapeutic and almost a spiritual experience.
And I think it's what you're saying about having another hobby is so important, because I think it helps you relax, and sometimes that's when you have your best ideas, as well as when you're not super stressed all the time. I did a pottery course last summer and one for my birthday this year, and I enjoyed it so much. I was so bad, but that almost makes it better because you have no expectations of yourself. Like you're just going there to enjoy it.
And I think that's one of the key things about these types of hobbies, especially when they're creative hobbies, is you have such high expectations of yourself in other things that you do, to go into something where you're just like, it's okay to be shit at it. Like, some of what I said earlier, like aim to be shit at it and get good at it later. It's like, it's kind of, it's freeing. It's like, no one's relying on me to make this be amazing, which quite often is the case when you're a CEO, especially as you have team members and so on. It's just like, I can go in and I can screw this up and it's fine. It's liberating. But pottery is really cool. I used to do that years ago. I'd love to do
really?
I've tried all the mediums. Like, at one point in my life I was convinced I was going to be an artist. So
No,
I have two paintings here actually that are, I want you to guess when you think I started this painting. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, wow.
Guess when you think I started that.
I have no idea.
10 years ago. I still haven't finished it.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow. It looks amazing though.
Thank you. Yeah. And then this other one here. This is, and I do a lot of like fantasy and sci-fi stuff. It's not coming through. Yeah. That one, amazing. 8 years ago. Haven't finished it.
I guess you've got almost the most difficult parts of each one left. The faces and the eyes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's one of the reasons why, I don't know if you saw on LinkedIn, I'm doing my outhouse. I'm converting that into my new office.
I didn't see.
So that's an ongoing project at the moment. And one of the ideas of that is it would be an office space for me, because I'm in the living room currently, which is a nightmare with the kids running around and stuff. And then also have a studio space to actually try and get back into it. because
Yeah.
I need to practice what I preach, right? Talking about hobbies and things like that. You know.
Oh, so you designing? Is it up yet? Are you midway with designing the studio, or?
So the building was already there, so it's just an outbuilding, but it was just full of junk. So and it was just a breeze block building. So now I've insulated it. I've put a floor in, and so like the main sort of structural stuff is pretty much done. I've just got to panel the ceiling now and stuff. So there's a lot of DIY before getting onto the practical and cosmetic side of things. There's still a bit more. And I had a week off where I did most of it, and now I'm just doing it weekends and topping it up. So hopefully in the next month or two, I should be in there. Fingers crossed.
Oh, that's so exciting. A good project to have as well.
Yeah, and I used to do wedding portraits as well. I used to actually sell them. People would send me the photos of them in the whatever photo they wanted recreating, and I'd do like a huge version of it, or even just couple portraits, kid portraits, stuff like that. So I want to get back into that, because if it's really rewarding to just sit there and be focused on something creative.
Yeah, I wish I could paint. I can't.
I think everyone can paint.
I could do like an abstract thing.
Exactly.
But my granddad paints as well. I've only seen a few things that he's done, but I wish that I had inherited that talent.
See, now this is an interesting thing. I don't believe in talent per se. Right.
Okay.
I don't really believe that there is such a thing as kind of an inherent or
interesting.
talent. I don't think that's the way it works. I think with enough passion, anyone's good at anything, and some people might take more naturally to something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are more talented than anyone else. You know? That's my perception of it. Like when you look at someone like Usain Bolt, you say, well, he's naturally talented in running. No, he has a biological advantage for running, and then he's had years of training, which got him to that point. So not everyone could do that, because there's a biological disadvantage other people would have. Like me, I'm tiny and I've got shorter muscles and shorter legs, so obviously I wouldn't be able to run as fast. But I could still become a fast runner if I decided to. I wouldn't be Usain Bolt, but I could, But no one's going to say, "Oh, well, that's a natural talent." I don't know. I think people forget to pay attention to the part where people were really bad at something for a really long time and just go, "Oh, you're really talented."
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think you're right about you can learn anything if you set your mind to it. And also I think it's how you learn. So I also teach piano. So that's one of the things that I do to keep myself going. And it's really interesting seeing how different people learn.
Right.
And it's really rewarding, and it's great to know like how if you change your style of teaching, it can benefit people so much. Like you have to be quite flexible in what you do, especially teaching adults and children. But particularly in adults, you notice how much your mental state affects your ability as well. So like if someone comes in, they're super positive, and even if they're bad, they really concentrate, they'll always progress much faster than someone who's like gone in there. And normally everyone starts good because they're an adult and they decided to pick up a new hobby. But I think as an adult picking up a new hobby, sometimes it's harder than when you're a child. So you kind of have to, exactly what we were saying before, kind of just accept that you're not going to be amazing straight away, but just keep doing. And I think when people don't pick it up really quickly, they're like, they're really hard on themselves. Even if I think they're doing really well, they're like, oh no, I want to get better faster. So
adults, we are as adults very hard on ourselves about everything. We don't, because I think there's this element of thinking either A, I'm a grown up, so I should be able to do these things quicker, or B, there's this ticking clock element, which is like, I don't have time for this. Like either I'm too busy, or my life is going away before my very eyes. I've only got a certain amount of time before I can learn this thing before I'm 40 or whatever. And it's like, dude, it doesn't matter. You've got loads of time, and even if you run out of time before you end up being good at this thing, guess what? You're not going to care. You'll be gone. You won't be lying on your deathbed thinking, "Oh, I wish I'd learned piano." It's not that big a deal. Just enjoy it. But we get in our own heads very, very well. Kids don't have that as much.
A friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, subscribe for more, and join the conversation in the comments. It really helps us out. Thank you.
They get frustrated, but they don't. Yeah, exactly. Like my son, he's been learning recently how to use Blender, which is 3D rendering software.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, and like he's blown my mind with how good he is, considering he's only 8 years old. And watching him use my computer and kind of go through that process has been really fascinating, because for a kid that gets in trouble for not sitting still or paying attention in school and all this kind of stuff, he was sat watching a YouTube tutorial that was about 4 hours long,
Wow.
over a period of months, telling him step by step how to do this thing. And he's done it to an amazing standard, but he screwed it up like 6 times and had to start again every single time. And, he was frustrated, but he was like, no, I'll do it again. Like I didn't see that with other things that he's done. So like this, again, to your point about the teaching style, I think plays a huge part in that, and the way that someone learns, because if he learned by making the mistake, whereas in school, you don't get that many chances to make that many mistakes, like before you get told off. You do a few, but not as many. Especially if you're in a classroom full of people, other kids, all maybe some are succeeding, and then it makes you think, well, why am I not succeeding? Oh, screw this, So it's interesting how everyone learns differently. I find it infinitely fascinating to watch my son learn something, or anyone learn something.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's very fascinating,
especially because you see them from a baby, and then they're always constantly learning. It must be a really amazing experience to see that happening as well.
Yeah, and then we've got a 7-month-old as well, or 6-7-month-old as well, watching him sort of learn all kinds of things, picking things up, and just even watching him, the way he uses his hands. Like he's now started doing this, picking things up like this, so delicately, like this. And it's like, why is he? How did he learn that? Like, why has he turned into a crab? Like, what's going on? It's amazing. But so you're a pianist. I don't think I've ever had to say that word in real life before. Pianist. It's such a risky word. I don't know why. And yeah, so is that something that you classically trained? Did you used to perform? Like, what's that?
I was classically trained, but I don't perform. I get very terrified of performing in front of people.
Oh, really?
I love teaching. Yeah, so I'll play for myself. I'll play for my partner. But sometimes I can hear him like creeping up and then listening, and then I get nervous and then I mess it up.
No, that's such a shame.
Yeah, but I love playing, and I find it really relaxing, and I love teaching. So I've done that since I kind of finished my grades. I started teaching, and I've always done that no matter what job I've had on the side. So yeah, I'm really grateful that my parents helped me to learn it. So yeah, I had piano lessons when I was a kid too. So did my brother. It's not something that took to me. The biggest struggle I had was reading music. That was the biggest struggle I had. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. So I ended up picking up the guitar instead and learning by ear, basically. And I found that much more comfortable, learning tab and learning to just listen to music and then playing it. But yeah, reading sheet music, I always really struggled with that, and it's a skill that I really wish I had learned. I'm not sure why, because I'm not a musician now, but there's something about that skill that I get very envious of people who know it. Yeah, well, it's always interesting because I'm almost the opposite, because I can read music, but I'm always more envious of people like you who can just sit down and like play something, whereas I would struggle more with that. I kind of rely to have it there. Maybe it's just how our brains are programmed differently.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because I'd have assumed that even with your classical training and knowing how to read music, you would still probably be able to do that, actually. If you
I think I could, but it just doesn't come as like naturally to me.
Right, so, because perhaps you're overthinking it somewhat.
Yeah,
because you're applying a system to it that doesn't really need to be there, right?
Yeah. So I've taught people who are more inclined to just sit down and improvise something, the basics, and then they just run away with it, and I'm always like, oh wow, that's really impressive.
Yeah, there are some people who are just insanely naturally talented. Like, so a bit of backstory. I did go to college originally to learn to be an artist, dropped out of that, went back to college again because I thought I was going to be a musician, dropped out of that. But along the way, I met a lot of friends who are very musically talented, incredibly talented individuals. And the first company I ever founded, actually, which is this, 3SM, was a a music promotions company, and we used to put on open mics and then band nights and stuff like that. And so throughout my life, I've met incredibly talented musicians and creatives, and there are just those occasional individuals you meet and you're just like, how? Like they can pick up any instrument, and you know what I mean? And you're just like, how? Like, I know a guy who's an amazing guitarist, amazing singer, songwriter, amazing drummer, like, and he's not like mediocre at these things. He's like the best I've heard at all of those things. And I'm just like, it's incredible. Like, you know, and how these people aren't famous, I just don't understand.
Yeah, that would be amazing, just to be able to pick up any instrument.
So what kind of music are you, if you're classically trained, I'm going to assume you have some interest in the classics, but do you but you know, what other genres do you like? And this is me just being completely nosy now, but like,
to be honest, I do really love classical music. So I listen to Classic FM a lot. I play a lot of classical music, and I just find it really relaxing. But I'd say particularly if I was to narrow it down, like more like romantic music,
right?
And like Ian Aldi. So love playing his music.
Right.
I'm just sitting down, just playing anything. But yeah, I'm definitely a classical person.
I know very little about classical music, I'm afraid, so I won't be able to. But is that Ian Aldi a composer, a pianist?
Yes, he's a modern composer.
Right.
And he does a lot of, I mean, it's fairly simple in a way, so it's kind of nice because a lot of my students can learn it pretty quickly. Some of his like simpler music or simplified, and it's like a lot of broken chords, but it sounds really lovely. It's kind of like film music, so it's kind of very emotional and atmospheric. So yeah, I would say playing film music and classical is what I love to focus on.
It's funny because I had Gabriel of Tutti on. I don't know if you're aware of him.
No,
you would get on very well with him. Another founder, he's launching has developed and launched, I should say, a SaaS-enabled marketplace for those in the creative spaces to be able to find venues for things like rehearsals and film productions and things like that. And he comes from a family of a long line of classical musicians. And his wife is actually a classical musician as well, who tours all around with a quartet and stuff like that. Very interesting guy, and I've worked with him. He's a client of mine, and also I've had him on the podcast, and we've talked at length about all different kinds of stuff. And similar sort of thing. He obviously brought up classical music, and you know that's kind of what he grew up on, being surrounded by it. And similar thing, I said, you know, I don't know anything about it, but one thing that he's also very passionate about is movies. And being in the film industry and so on. And it's funny how there's a lot of crossover there. And you mentioned obviously about Lord of the Rings and so on. Like if there's one area that classical music tends to touch all of our lives, it's in film. And you know, especially just like Oppenheimer, you know, not long come out, you know, one of the best composers, you know, in the business, involved in that project. Like that's the extent probably of my semi-regular connection with classical music, and for most people, but I don't think that's a bad thing.
So who was the composer for Oppenheimer? Was it Hans Zimmer?
Yeah, Hans Zimmer.
Oh yeah. I mean, his music's amazing, and I'm
pretty sure it is.
I went to see him live in concert, and I would recommend it to anyone because, first of all, even if you don't know his name, you'll definitely know his music.
Oh yeah,
and you have like a live orchestra and live singers. It's just so.
Oh no, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was Ludwig Göransson.
Oh, I don't know.
Swedish composer.
Oh wow! Oh, I'll have to listen. I haven't actually seen the film yet.
Right. Oh no, it says. Oh no, Ludwig Göransson, Swedish composer, scored films such as Fruitvale Station, the Rocky franchise, Creed 2, Venom, Tenet. So he's worked with Christopher Nolan before, and Oppenheimer. That's interesting. Fruitvale Station. That was a beautiful movie. Oh, interesting. Okay, I've not heard of him before. But yeah, I mean, Hans Zimmer is one of the more well known. Even for people I don't think who are necessarily into that scene, they still mostly recognize that name, right?
Yeah.
What about the who composed the Lord of the Rings soundtrack?
Howard Shore.
Right. Yeah, because that's a beautiful score.
I think that's one of my favorites. This is going to show how sad I am, but the other day on Classic FM they did like a countdown, and it was like the 100 best film scores.
Yeah.
That was number one, and I was so happy about it because it is amazing. It's amazing.
They have that show. You know, what time is that show? They do a film specific show, don't they?
I think it might be on a Sunday. I think it's.
I thought they did something every day.
Oh, do they?
I thought so. Maybe they used to. I don't know. That's it. FM film scores. I know we should probably look this up later, but because we're
Saturday 7
movie,
I think.
What is it? Sorry.
Saturday 7 till 9.
Oh yeah, Saturday night at the movies with Andrew Collins. Yeah, Saturday at 5 p.m. Yeah, cool. Because I remember, there was quite a few occasions where I put on Classical FM while I'm cooking, because it's a nice thing to cook to, and it would come on. I never realised it was on a specific day, and yeah, it was my favourite one because I would quite often like to try and guess if they hadn't said what the film's from.
Yeah.
And then you try and guess what it's from, and I'd be like, and the amount of times I get it wrong, I'm like, I should have known that. I used to go to a lot of Comic-Cons as well because of my artwork. I used to do a lot of them, and quite often you would have film score playing in the background, and it was kind of a thing with you and like some of the other people there that sort of like, which one is this, like, who's the biggest nerd, who can guess what this is from, Back to the Future, no, it's ET, it's definitely ET, that kind of stuff.
My family does a quiz every Christmas Eve with like the whole family, and there's always like a film music round, and I love that one because I'm like, I'm pretty good at it, especially if it's multiple choice. I'll definitely get it, but if it's not, I'm likely to. So no, because
sometimes it's like you hear it, you're like, I know this. I know this. What is it? Because that's the amazing thing about film scores. Like, they can embed themselves into your minds, and as soon as you hear them, you get all of the same feelings that you felt when you watched the film. Even if you're not remembering any specifics, but like right, if you were to play, especially to certain generations, if you were to play certain scores, like, you get a very clear reaction. Play the score from ET or Back to the Future or Jurassic Park, things like that. To certain people, you get those automatic visceral reactions to it.
And it's same with any music. Like, if you listen to a song which you listen to maybe on repeat during a certain time of your life, it will, if you hear it again, I don't know about you, but it always will bring me straight back to whatever was happening at that time.
Absolutely. It's interesting because perhaps I should pick your brains on this more, off this thing. But like, classical music is something that I've always loved, but I felt like I would need to put some time in to learn more about in order to appreciate, like, which composers should I listen to, which, things like that. And it just feels like such a rabbit hole to go down. I would love to know more about some modern composers like the one you mentioned that I should check out, because of, yes, I'm aware of the classics to an extent, the classics of the classics, right? To an extent. The classic composers of our time and days gone and so on. But it's the modern classical music that I'd be interested to learn more about, and sort of who's doing the interesting stuff, like, where is it coming from, things like that. But I just wouldn't know where to start.
To be honest, I don't really know. I'm not that. If it's something that I've played before, then I'll know it. But other than that, I think it's also because it doesn't have any words to it, and it's normally quite relaxing. And so I just find it really soothing, especially if I've got like a lot on and I feel really stressed, to have that kind of music on in the background. But I wouldn't say I'm an expert at all.
I think we need classical music more now than ever. This might sound like a massive overstatement, but like, bear with me, because I've got because I think there's so much noise out there, in general. And if you listen to the radio, especially, and listen to what's in the charts and so on, I think it's a pretty commonly accepted thing in the music industry, and by musicians these days, that everything's becoming quite homogenous. From a production standpoint, everything's being compressed. From a lyrical perspective, everything is starting to sound the same. There's not really any content there. Tones of voice, the types of artists, like, everything is becoming the same. There's even been some studies on it that prove that that's a fact. Chord progressions and compositions and everything is just becoming less and less complex, and it's just not relaxing to listen to. It's not designed to relax. It's designed to be viral, to, you know, go viral on TikTok and to have, you know, girls dancing in front of their camera on it. Like, that's what it's for, you know. It's, and so, you know, the case for classical music that's actually somewhat stimulating, that elicits a mixture of emotions and allows you to explore the feelings that music can give you, which is, I believe, what an art form should be for, to allow you to explore your own self. There's a good case for us needing more of that in our lives these days, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's why I like listening to it so much, is because it's kind of like a break, basically. Like, it's something in the background. So I feel like, I don't know, especially if you're working from home alone or something, it's nice to have some kind of noise there, and it's soothing, and it's not gonna, I don't know, it feels like it's nice for my brain.
A brain massage, and via your ears.
Exactly.
I need to make more of an effort to maybe listen to some more, you know, more classical stuff. It also feels like you're listening to your very own sort of soundtrack as well, doesn't it? Like your own film score, which can be quite nice.
And also, I think all the presenters on there as well are just like really calming and like very cheerful, and it's just like it's, you know, it's going to be like a really positive vibe. Do you know what I mean? It's always like,
and also I've never felt as British as when I listen to classical FM as well, like, because the presenters are so British as well, like, you know, you don't get anyone on there sort of going like, "You're right, mate, nice to see you today, thanks for watching." So you know, it's very Queen's English, like,
that's true,
old school BBC, you know. Like, welcome to classical FM. It's like, get your cup of tea in hand and get ready.
Exactly.
Get a crumpet and some jam sandwiches, and we're ready to go. So do you think that you will ever perform live?
Maybe. I have spoken to it with Chris, my partner, about maybe going to one of the stations where they have a piano and just playing to help me get over that fear. So I'll probably do that one day.
That would be good. Definitely. Because I used to perform on stage, and it's not as bad. It's similar to, like, we were talking about earlier about going up and speaking in front of people. Once you do it, it's actually, you get into the zone and you zone it all out. I suppose the only problem with these pianos at, you know, and stations and stuff is they'll probably frustrate you because they'll be incredibly out of tune.
At least if it goes wrong, I can just blame it on the piano.
Oh, that's it. Well, we all know that good musicians will blame the exactly. I wanted to play violin when I was younger, and I picked it up for a bit. That's a beautiful instrument as well. Like, there's something about the violin which always has spoken to me. It was stringed instruments as a whole, stringed classical instruments as a whole, but the violin's beautiful because of the similarities and tones between a human voice. Is like scary. It's eerily, you know. I mean, strings are obviously a huge part of an orchestra for that reason. It's like the vocal cords of the orchestra, isn't it? It's incredible. It can be used to elicit some pretty impressive emotional responses.
Yeah, definitely. I did learn the violin at school, but haven't played it since, and I really enjoyed it. And there's two. So the second number 2 spot was after Lord of the Rings was Schindler's List.
Oh my, yeah.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, God, that film as well. Like, and that score, beautiful. And that score and that film. I mean, there are some moments where in film where you see, you know, every component of it that just goes perfectly well together. And that score and that film goes so well together. It's insane. I think Schindler's List, that score is probably always on that list, right? I'm sure I've heard it on that list multiple times before. If you ask me what it was right now and how much I couldn't do it, but as soon as I hear it, I would recognize it.
So that's amazing. And another one, The Lark Ascending. Do you know that one?
No, I don't know.
I'll send you the link because it's a classical piece of music, but it opens with a violin solo, and it's just amazing. I did go and see it live once, and it was just incredible because it's just one solo violinist at the beginning, and it's, you know, mimicking a bird. And it just sounds amazing. So
wow, fascinating. It's funny because there's a lot of classical pieces of music as well out there that that if anyone was to hear them, they go, I know this,
Yeah, I think you would recognize it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many, and you're like, I know this. Couldn't tell you what it's called. Couldn't tell you who was the composer. Nothing. I think the other thing that's quite confusing for the layman about classical music is that, there's a lot of movements. There's there's a lot of different. Something can be composed by someone hundreds of years ago, but be played by multiple orchestras, and over the years. And so it's essentially like, the entire musical industry is built on the foundation of covers. Right, yeah. That's basically what it is. So, but I think that's confusing for people who want to get into it. They're like, wait a minute, it's who's fifth in C sharp, but like, what does that mean? Just tell me what it's called.
Yeah. I've just thought of someone else that you should have a look at as well. Max Richter. Have you heard of him?
No, I haven't. Max Richter.
Yeah, so he is a modern composer, but he does his own work, but he's also like recomposed other classical music. So there's one Vivaldi Spring. I can't remember exactly what he calls it, but I'm sure if you searched his name in that, it would come up.
Yeah, loads of stuff has just come up about him. Oh, right. British-German composer. He's done some movies that I like. Ad Astra, a few others. Yeah. Okay. See, now this is useful because now I have a name. What I can do is in Spotify, I can start a radio station based on him, and then I can go off on an adventure. That's what I love to do with artists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Niels Fram as well.
Probably. That name rings a bell.
Yes. Kind of similar, but more, I would say, like more electronic music.
Okay, interesting. So like a crossover between classical and that's similar to what the Oppenheimer
interesting
was. I think I haven't seen the movie, but from what I hear, there's some really interesting mixtures in there. What is his name again? Neil
Fram. So Frahm. I'm probably pronouncing that awfully, and I apologize.
Sounds right. Neil Fram, German musician as well. Okay, interesting. Okay, well, thank you.
Good starting point for you, anyway.
Yeah. You started me off on a good path there. Thank you, I appreciate it. Really quick question before we sort of start getting into the wrapping up portion of the talk, because I'll be honest, I forget quite often that we're recording a show, and I just noticed the time, which is kind of the point. I hope you feel the same way. It's just what was the question? Oh yeah, you mentioned about Lord of the Rings. I wanted to ask you, did you watch the Amazon series?
Yes, I did.
What did you think of it?
I actually really enjoyed it.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
It was, I think there's always such a big expectation that it's really difficult for anyone to take that on. And I don't think it was as good as the films, but I did enjoy watching it. Did you not enjoy it?
I didn't watch it.
You didn't watch it?
I didn't watch it because I watched a little bit and then I couldn't watch it.
Okay.
and then I watched the reviews to find out if I was missing anything, and the reviews told me I wasn't missing anything. I try to follow along with kind of movie and TV news, I suppose, ish. There's a few reviewers that I like to watch and a few reporters on sort of what's going on in the film world and so on, not just Hollywood, but kind of in general. And the general consensus was that it was kind of a bit of a failure and, not too great, let's just say, for a few reasons.
I think it was, it definitely doesn't have the same, I think if I'd watched it and didn't know it was related to Lord of the Rings, I probably wouldn't, apart from the obvious things, I would have thought it was like a just another fantasy thing. It didn't have that same a feeling attached to it.
And I think that was part of the criticism, was just that because it was so far removed from the source material that it was just like, why don't you just do your own thing? Like, you didn't have to, but that's Hollywood for you, right? You gotta tie it to a current IP to get money. So, but apparently they lost quite a lot of money on that show because
wasn't it one of the most expensive shows made? Yeah,
it was like 1 billion or something like that to make the show. Yeah. Insane. No, just interested to know what your thoughts were there because of so I mean, were you a fan of the books originally, or is it more of the movies of your entry point?
Yeah, no, I love the books. Yeah.
Was it that far removed then, the series from the books? Because I hear that
I haven't read
some of the canon there.
So the books so the Lord of the Rings books are what the films cover.
Yeah.
But then there's another book, and I'm going to pronounce it wrong, called the Silmarillion or something. And It's like more of I haven't read it, but I think it's like the whole history of Middle Earth, and
Right.
that's what they based the show on, was the beginning of that.
I see.
I haven't read that, so I
Okay.
didn't really have anything to compare it to.
Yeah, I think it's hard, like some hardcore fans that
Yeah.
that knew the law and everything, and they were like, this is completely pissed all over that. And you know, yeah. And then of course there's always the controversies around, you know, race swapping and gender swapping and all that sort of stuff, which you know, with certain things I can understand, other things I don't think it's important. But like, you know, certainly in a made up world based heavily on Norse mythology, you know, and European culture and stuff like that, I can kind of understand some of the criticisms around that when you're adding a diverse range of people for the sake of it, just to get brownie points, as opposed to just honoring the material that was kind of given to you, you know.
Yeah.
There seems to be a bit of a trend in Hollywood at the moment of doing that, for just no reason other than just, you know, wanting to score political points, it seems, which is a shame, but that's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
But yeah, as we're coming towards the end, then I'm curious to know, and I ask everyone this, and there's no right or wrong answer. I'm just curious to know what, you know, for those listening out there, a lot of which are founders, you know, a lot of founders watch, listen to this. Not enough. We could do it more, but you know, some, and you know, investors and so on. But primarily founders. What stuff have you learned over this last few years in, you know, starting your previous company and then this one, that you think that would be really useful information to give out there to the world? You know, some pointers aside from, you know, listening to classical music. That's an obvious one. You know, facing your fears, you know, going outside your comfort zone. Some of the stuff we're talking about. What are some other things that maybe would be good to, some tips?
So I think we touched on it earlier, but you know, asking for advice and support and building your network. I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned, is that, and one of the mistakes I made with my last business was not reaching people enough and not building my network enough. So I think it was because of a few things. I think, you know, I was like, oh, this is my business, I need to make it work. And maybe I was a bit embarrassed, I don't know, about asking for advice and help from people, and also didn't really know where to look. So I think making sure that you have that supportive network around you is really important. And unfortunately, not unfortunately, but I think if your family and friends don't have their own business, they're unlikely to really understand what it's like for you. And I sometimes felt frustrated when I've been trying to explain something to someone, and I can just see that, not in a nasty way, but they, you know, they just don't get it, or they're not even that interested because it's not something they can relate to. Advice and empathy from is really important. So there's loads of like founder support groups out there, and there's some really great ones. So I think if you find one that resonates with you, that can be super helpful. And I think don't try to do anything on your own. I mean, I'm a solo founder, but I'm always asking people for advice, and I'm always grateful that I have, because I think when things are going the worst is when I get too inside my own head. I start to panic and stress out, kind of block people out, and then it just kind of snowballs. Whereas if you get a fresh perspective, it can really help, one, keep you positive, but also give you new ideas about where to go and how to look at something in a different way.
Good advice, and I wholeheartedly support that. And yeah, it's funny, you're not the first person that I've spoke to that talks about the reception you can get from friends and family not being what you would hope it to be. And that's no disservice to them. Like, they still love you, they still want what's best for you, but you know, they're never going to give you practical advice. It's always going to be emotionally led advice. And I think that's the key, isn't it? That, you know, they want you to be successful, but they also, in some way, I spoke with a psychologist about this that I met actually on Wednesday, and we talked about how families don't necessarily want what's best for you, they want what's best for them through you. Right? And it's kind of a controversial thing to say, but essentially they want to make sure that you're going to cause them as least trouble as possible. So if you got a stable career and a stable income, it's like, okay, I'm good, I don't need to worry about them, they're fine. right? It is kind of a self-serving interest with our loved ones that we want them to be okay, more because it just makes it easier for
Easy
us.
for you. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, in some ways. So it's just and that's fine. That's just the way it is. But it's because then you don't have to worry as much about the people you love. But yeah, also it's just like you said, it's not an area that particularly maybe interests them or they don't understand. So it is difficult to speak to your family and maybe get the support. They're not going to say, yeah, go for it, I'll support you. Like, what do you need? Like, they're going to be dubious and they're going to be worried about you. So to your point about looking for advice, I mean, not to take the opportunity to blow my own trumpet. That's exactly what I do, right? I love giving people free advice and helping them. And one of the biggest things sometimes, like you sort of pointed out there, is people get in their own heads and overcomplicate things. And there's so much information out there; it's overwhelming as to what the first steps you should, be to take in this or that. And majority of the time, the response I get once I give advice to people is, "Man, that was so obvious. Thank you so much. Like, why couldn't I see that? It was right in front of me." That's not the number one response I get from people. It's like, yeah, man, like you just got to make it simple.
Yeah.
Stop worrying about all these things. Just do that. It's easy. I often bring it down to a very basic thing. Do whatever you need to do to make your business money.
Yes.
That's what it comes down to. Like, a business has to make money. So if you're thinking about all these different things that you could do, it's like, well, look at them all. Which one makes your business money? That one? Okay, do that one. Forget all of these ones. Do that one. There's your answer.
Yeah.
But great advice. Really great advice. And that's why I hope to see you at some more of these networking events.
Yeah, definitely.
Actually get a meet in person. Maybe I can bug you for more.
So close.
So close. There was a few people that I just, we were all said before, I'll see you there. Yeah, you're going. I'll see you there. Didn't see it. And then others that I didn't know were going, and all sorts. So. But yeah, maybe next time we'll make an effort to find each other.
Yeah.
I'll pop you a message and say I'll be there at the bar. Come and see me. All right. Well, look, I'll let you go. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation as much as I have.
No, it's been great. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
My absolute pleasure. And keep up the amazing work. I'm going to be watching closely. So. But in a supportive way, don't worry, not in a judgmental way, in a supportive way.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I hope it all continues to go on, upwards and grow, and more people join, and I'll put the details of where people can find you and Loom in the description of this video as well, so you can find it. But is there anywhere else you want to direct people to, or?
So you can find us online at loom.fashion, so super easy, and on Instagram at the Loom app.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, I'll let you go to enjoy your day, and thanks for putting up with me.
No, thanks so much for having me. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
My pleasure. All right. Well, take care. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll speak soon.
Yeah, speak soon. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for watching and/or listening. Please like, subscribe, and join the conversation in the comments below.